Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Kingpin Camper. So today we're going to talk to you about the Andersen Hitch. You know, we've been using this hitch for about 3.5 years. We went from the B&W Sliding Hitch to this hitch in December of 2019, and we have used this hitch with our 2016 Ram 2500 short bed and our 2019 Cougar 29 RKS. And it's worked great for what we've needed. We have had some issues. We're going to go over all those today. We're going to look at all the pros, all the cons, and we're just going to let you know what we think and whether we would choose this hitch again. And we're going to get into that right after this. Now I want to say that I've used this hitch for probably over 30,000 miles. We have pulled it from Tennessee to Myrtle Beach, back to Tennessee, back to Michigan, 2 or 3, actually probably more than 3 times from Tennessee to Michigan. We went from Tennessee to the Badlands, to Yellowstone, to the Tetons and back to Tennessee. And we're back here in the Badlands of South Dakota again. We've also been to Washington, D.C. We've went to New Orleans. We went to northern Louisiana a couple of times. We have drugged this thing all over, mostly the eastern half of the country, but we have used it a lot, and we're here to tell you about it. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It doesn't take much time on the internet to look around and find a picture of an Andersen hitch that's all bent and failed. Now, you know, most of these images, they just don't share any context with them. And for me, that's an important factor. I did see a post that somebody posted of their own hitch, and they were just saying that they could not believe how the hitch failed and this and that and the other. And then they showed pictures of their accident, and like the whole front corner of their truck was gone, but it wasn't their truck's fault for falling apart, but it was the hitch's fault for bending. And I don't personally see that as I wouldn't trust any hitch after I got into a major accident, but I'm just telling you, that's the way I feel about it. I don't know, you might feel different. You know, I feel that these hitches are made well, they're strong, and you need to use them in a way that's smart. You know, I probably wouldn't use it for the upper limits of what it's rated for. Our camper is about 2/3 of what the hitch is rated for. You know, it's a quote half-ton towable camper. And for that, I think that this thing does great. I will say that I've always been happy with my clearances. No, I can't turn a full 90 degrees. Everybody gets hung up on that 90-degree thing, but I can turn pretty close to 80 degrees, I think. You know, I don't feel like the small amount of difference that from where I can turn to 90 degrees is going to be beneficial at all in helping me get to any site whatsoever. I really think that I can get into anywhere that I could if my truck could turn a full 90 degrees and back in. One tip that I will share that I started doing about a year ago is I reversed the chains. You know, I used to have the chains coming off of the hitch and they would clamp down in the bed, and I reversed those so that way they stay in the bed and you just pick the hook up and you put it on the Andersen adapter on the 5th wheel. And since I've done that, it's made hooking up just a lot easier. And I mean, it's not really that much easier, but it's less headache. You don't have the chains hanging around when it's unhooked, and they're not getting in the way. And you know, you don't have them dangling down all the time. You just pick them up out of the bed, you just clamp it on there, and you're done. Now with that, I did add a little small piece of chain and a carabiner at the bottom of the bed. That way I can easily clamp the emergency brake cable to that, but it's been no issue. Another tip is that the large set screws in the Andersen adapter plate, they actually are what hold the Andersen adapter in place and keep it from twisting. And these Allen heads are 1/4 inch, and they have to be torqued down to 40. And if you get just the regular socket adapter for the Allen key, it's not long enough because it's got to make it through the red cone-shaped adapter on there and then to the screw, and it's just not quite long enough to get it torqued all the way down. And so I did buy this set of extended Allen keys, and it's been great. The first time that I actually did this, I ended up just getting a cheap Allen key from the store, and I cut the L-shaped part of the head off, and then I put it down into a 1/4 inch socket, and I was able to torque it down that way. But even just being 40 pounds, you know, that steel's not the greatest, and it twisted that Allen wrench so bad that I could never use it again. Now those extended Allen keys I did get off of Amazon, so I want to share the link there. This is truthfully the only one that I've used out of the set, but I always keep it in the camper or the truck. That way I have it handy if I need to remove the plate or add it back on. And then I just use the same one with my 1/2-inch torque wrench with an adapter to go from 1/2-inch to 3/8. So let's go over the pros of the Andersen hitch. Number one, the price just really isn't that bad when comparing it to other options out there. Number two, for me at least, is that I have a lot of clearance. I did have to reverse the adapter, which kind of surprised me. You know, they actually in the directions give you a measurement to use. I didn't use the measurement because I thought I'm too good for that. I'm going to put it on forward because I want all the clearance I can have. And so I put that on forward, and I very controlled did a turn. And by having that forward, essentially the reason they want you to take that measurement is because it was going to put the back of my king box right into the side rail of my truck when I took a sharp turn, and I figured that out at about 30 degrees because I kept turning about 10 degrees and taking a look, seeing if anything was going to mess up. Because when I was using that B&W hitch, I only used the slider one time, and that was to make the video that I'm going to share up here. And in the video, it actually shows the back of that breaking my tailgate, and it bent it, and it's been, I mean, it closes fine, but it's been out of shape ever since then, and it really got on my nerves, and I didn't want to damage anything else, so I was taking everything nice and slow. After that, I did reverse that adapter around backwards, and it actually increased my clearance. I have plenty of clearance in between the cap and the truck, and I have plenty of clearance on the side behind that king box that where I had the issue with my sidewall of my truck. Now the third benefit to the Andersen, as far as I'm concerned, is the ease of removing it from the truck. You know, compared to that big old sucker of the B&W Slider, it's like night and day different. You know, I couldn't even get the B&W out of the truck by myself. I actually bought an adapter to put in there. That way I could use a winch and winch it up, but then I learned that my truck's so big that I couldn't find anything to pull it under to use the winch. And then when I finally found something to use the winch, I think it's because the slider was so big that it wasn't right over the square tube that you're trying to pull out. And so it kind of binded up, and it was hard to get out. And so ever since that I've switched to the Andersen, I've had no issues taking it out of the truck, and it's been working great for me. All right, so let's talk about some cons of the Andersen Ultimate Hitch as well, because every time we look at pros, we want to look at cons. Nothing's perfect, right? Number one, the biggest con for me is the fact that it does put more strain on the jacks, because the jacks of your camper actually have to raise all the way up over the ball and then back down. And so with a lot of fifth wheel jacks, you don't have to raise it up that high. And so you're not exercising those jacks to those extreme points sometimes, because, you know, not every campsite's perfectly level. And con number two is obviously they aren't the strongest hitches in the world. But really, I believe that if you use this hitch appropriately, use your brain when you're picking one out, and you don't have a monster fifth wheel like a triaxle that I've seen some of these on, I think that it's perfectly fine. I think it does have its place in today's market, and truthfully, I wouldn't be comfortable using any hitch after I was in a major auto accident. And I will say, with any issues that I've had with the Andersen hitch, you know, their customer service department has been great. So I am going to talk about some issues that I've had and some interactions with them that I've had in the past. And we're just going to go through that because I'm going to let you guys know every issue that I've ever had with the hitch. So last winter I went to pick up my camper. It was at Shelburne RV having some work done. I went to pick it up to go on a winter camping trip, and the ball was actually frozen into the adapter. So Steve helped me mess around with it a little bit. We got it unfroze and we got hooked up to the truck. Now, we went down to Davy Crockett Birthplace State Park, and it was still freezing cold. And I wasn't able to get the ball out of the adapter when we got there. So what I ended up doing was I ended up pulling the pin on the ball, and then I raised the camper up and just pulled the ball out of the Andersen plate. And then I took that adapter off, so I took the adapter and the ball inside, and my balls were just froze. Once I got my balls thawed out, it took about 10 minutes. Everything worked fine. I gave it a good dose of WD-40 after that, and you know, it just started working fine. I've not had any issues with that since then, and because I do try to keep it lubed a little better these days. Now the next issue that we had was on a trip to New Orleans in January. You know, that was January this year. We went down there. I went to take the Andersen Hitch off. You know, in order to do that, all that you do is turn the handle and you pull it out. Well, the handle, it kind of just kept turning round and round, and it didn't feel like it was letting it unlock, and it wouldn't pull back. So I couldn't figure out what the issue was there. I actually just unhooked the whole base and everything from the truck, because I thought, you know, if this thing's going to be stuck, I'd rather it be stuck locked, and I'll just work on getting it back in the truck like this. And I don't want it to have an issue where I'm hours and hours away from home and I can't hook up. And so I did that. But when we got home, essentially I figured out it was a really easy fix. I thought I was going to have to replace the whole cable. And truthfully, that cable, I don't like things that are cable driven, because I always have issues out of them. That cable it's got a lot more resistance than it used to, and I probably am going to end up having to replace it before a real long time. But I will say that the issue with this particular place was it's kind of like a grill handle or a stove handle. You know, they have like a little D shape in there, and whenever you move the plastic knob, it moves whatever the metal spindle is behind there, in this case the locking mechanism. But that plastic piece had actually broken. It was cracked all the way up the side, so when you turned it, it just kind of spread out over that metal piece and turned around it and didn't turn it with it. So actually, after I figured that out, I was able to use a pair of pliers to just twist that. So I did call Andersen. They sent me a free plastic handle, no questions asked, and they sent that to me, and I put that on there, and it's been working fine since then. The only other issue that I've ever had with the hitch was actually when I picked it up over at Shelburne RV one time. Steve told me that he thought that a couple of the screws were stripping out. You know, I tightened them up, they tightened fine, so I didn't really worry with it at all. This has actually been the biggest issue that I had, because it worked fine. It worked fine for another year. I did talk to Andersen right after I talked to him. They sent me 4 of the large set screws. They're about 3 inches long, and we got the 1/4 inch tip on the end of them. But you know, I looked at it and I didn't feel any issues whenever you were trying to tighten it down, so I just left them alone. Well, they both decided to break. The 2 that's right beside the ball, they decided to break at the same time for me and not tighten up at all last time I needed to tighten it up, and because I actually did notice where it slid a little bit. So I went to make sure that those were properly torqued down and they wouldn't tighten up. So what ended up happening is I went to take them out and I couldn't get them out. And so the 1/4 inch inlet there where the Allen wrench goes, half of the side of it broke off on both of those. I'm going to show you a picture of that here. Now the issue with that is there's no way to get in there to tighten or loosen those. And so what I actually ended up doing for the first one, I took a pair of vice grips and put on the very end of that because it was sticking up a little bit, and I tried to just screw it all the way through it forward, and I had a lot of resistance, so that kind of worried me. So what I did is I took the vice grips off. I took a Dremel tool in both of those screws, and I made a slot in the very end of the screw. That way I could stick a screwdriver in there. And again, I tried to screw it all the way through out the top, and I got a lot of resistance out of the other screw. And so then I went and I used it clockwise from the top, which unscrewed it out the bottom, and I got one of them out. The other one, I worked on it for an hour, couldn't get it out. So we were actually on our way to northern Louisiana that day. And so I cut those bad threads off because I thought that might be an issue, and I still couldn't get it out. And so after I drilled another slot in the top of it, I left it sticking out about 1/4 inch, and I just put the adapter back on the trailer that way, and then I torqued all the other screws to equal 40 pounds. And that worked fine on that trip, but before we came out here, I wanted to really fix it right. And so I thought, well, maybe that Dremel tool just didn't get a big enough slot because I couldn't get a real good bite with my screwdriver. And so I actually took my angle grinder. It was at my mom's house where I've been working on her bathroom. And I took my angle grinder and put a bigger slot in there. I still couldn't get that thing in or out. And so I dropped it over at Shelburne RV, and Steve saved my day again. He was able, he just able to put some vice grips on there and get it to screw all the way through. He said I did have to go over it with a tap though, because the threads were a little bit messed up. But for me, I don't know, if I knew that common sense says there isn't anything that could hold that screw in, because it was just the same size threads all the way down. But it seemed like once you got to a certain point, there was a lot of resistance, which I guess was more of the thread issue. But it kind of scared me, so I backed down. He fixed it up for me, no problem. Went back, picked it up, got it on the camper, no issues at all. So I guess the big question is, would I buy the Andersen Hitch again, having used it for 3 years in towing somewhere around 30,000 miles? I think I would. I do say that, you know, it's kind of an issue with the base being kind of in the way sometimes, and while it's easy to take out, it does kind of get on my nerves sometimes. So I think if I had to do it again, I may try, my first pick would probably be a Gen Y gooseneck adapter or the Reese goose box. But, you know, the issue with those, and the issue with any fifth wheel hitch in a short bed truck, is you never know how much turning clearance you're going to have until you actually get that hitch, you put it in the truck, you hook it up to the camper, and you test it out. And so, you know, for all you guys that are lucky enough to be in either a B&W Slider or the Andersen Hitch and have a short bed Ram and a Cougar with a similar nose cap that I have, you know, I have these pictures of you that show you basically this is what you're going to have. But you know, there's nothing that I can go to and see, like if I got the Gen Y and I spent, I think they're like $1,500, it's a hard pill to swallow. But if I put that on the camper and then hooked it up the truck, and then I had less clearance than what I have now, I would be really regretful of that purchase. And so then I'll probably go back to using the Andersen Hitch. And so that's just the thing is, you know, these decisions will be easier in life if you always knew what the clearance was going to be. But I can tell you from using this hitch, I don't have any issues with it. You know, people say, oh, well, it's a safety thing. And I think that it's plenty strong as long as you don't test the limits of the hitch. And even if it did fail, under most circumstances, you know, you're going to have a distance between the front of your camper and the back window, because that's what everybody's worried of, is that it's going to come into the cab. I've never seen that in any of these pictures where people talk about it being the most horrible thing ever. And that reason for that is because usually the distance between your rear bumper and your cargo compartment on your fifth wheel is going to be less than the distance from the front cap to the back windshield. Does that make sense? So whenever you have a wreck, that cargo compartment is going to hit that bumper and stop before that front of the camper ever gets into your cab. I'm not an expert on this, I'm just sharing my opinion with you, but I really think that this is not a bad way to go, especially if you have a lighter camper. So guys, thank you for joining our family, thank you for following our adventures, and we hope you stay tuned, and we'll take you around on another adventure next week. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.